quick background on BDPA Atlanta. BDPA Atlanta is a membership organization that focuses on exposing individuals to emerging trends in technology and assisting those that need it with development in the technology spaces. We work on what I call 3 pillars, one being our K through 12 STEM program, our collegiate program, as well as our adult or professional program that we're engaging in today. Our K through 12 program, I would say, is more of our flagship program. And that's one where we teach full stack web development for 8 months out of the year to students that are interested in the topic. At the end of those sessions, the students get to compete in our national tournament, just depending on their exposure and growth in the topics that we taught. It's a really engaging time. We've had a great deal of success in the program, and we're just looking to continue what we've started. This year, we started a financial portion to the program for our youth. And in that, we have one of our members that teach investment principles to the students. So they use a application called TradeView, and he teaches them the fundamentals of investing. So understanding stocks, understanding their finances. So it's been very educational, not only to the students, but to the adults that are fortunate enough to be able to attend as well. So that's been really good. Our college program, we're still growing. Due to COVID, we weren't able to be on campus. So we're still trying to figure out, how to re-engage, our college members. But basically, our engagement with them is very similar to how we'd engage our professionals. And then it's our professional group. And that's what we're here for today. This group is developed to help those that are career changers or experienced but need more exposure to technology get just that. We invite speakers in to touch on particular technical topics, and we host a variety of just professional development activities. Today, we're fortunate enough to kick off our cloud series. And so with that, I am going to introduce John Verrett, or JV, to you, and I'm going to ask that he tell you a little bit more about Matrix, as one of our major sponsors, and introduce our guest speaker for today. So John, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Victor. Yeah, we're so happy, so proud to be connected with BDPA, and it's been a really fun last year and a half or so. And actually, finally, Victor and I got to meet in person like a month or two ago. That was a treat after about 13 months or so of just being on Zoom, and it was nice to finally be face to face. But yeah, so we're kicking off a 3-part series here on the cloud, and we have just an awesome person to do that kickoff for us, and Ashleigh Parrish. Ashleigh and I worked together back at Matrix. Wow, this
long time.
Should we say how? Yeah, it was probably, I don't know, as many years ago. I won't say how many because it'll make us feel old. So
it will.
but Ashleigh, what a great teammate and person to be working with. You'll see as she gets into this, she just has a lot of passion for what she does. Always looking for excellence, always looking to improve. So she's someone that when you're on a team with her, everybody gets better. So thank you, Ashleigh, for helping us kick off this 3-part series here. So we're going to touch on, kind of maybe some of the higher level parts of cloud transformation. Just, why do companies do this? What are maybe some of the just obvious savings, I think, and those kinds of things. But other main points that Ashleigh will step through. But anyways, yeah, Ashley, yeah, I'll hand it over to you and let you kind of speak to, you know, your background and your journey that you've had from, you know, project management to data center. You worked at the Weather Channel and now at Equifax. Just have had a terrific career. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for all the kind words. Yes, my days at Matrix really kick-started my career. But, you know, like he said, I've been very fortunate in my career. I kind of was very selective. After working for an IT staffing company, I was, you know, given the tools to kind of navigate through my own career and pick, you know, certain companies and or projects and that sort of thing that really just let me have a very very well-rounded, I think, experience in technology. So a lot of that plays into why I feel like I've done everything, because I kind of have. But I started out, moving into project management at Matrix, and then I just built a career out of it because I was very good at it. However, I knew that the functional side, so having a functional role, was not where I wanted to stay. So yeah, I mean, between, y'all can look at my LinkedIn. I don't want to have to go too lengthy into my background, but I've done everything from, front end, web and mobile, to I really prefer infrastructure. I thrive in, kind of being the infrastructure, network, and security side of the house. I've done everything from, data center exits and moving to cloud, to keeping data centers and also being in cloud, to having private cloud through, when I was at IBM, they had their own private cloud. So you name it, cloud has always been one of those areas. Even when I was at CBeyond, which is now Birch in telecom, the cloud has always been kind of a reoccurring theme. And it makes sense because as we go through some of the content I'm going to share with you this evening, cloud is something that all companies tend to gravitate towards. They just have to figure out how to do it, right? And then also be able to justify for the business and for obviously finance, right? Like why they're willing to spend X amount of money to get there. Because one thing about cloud is it's not immediate satisfaction. We go to the gym, we want to feel like, a month into our workout session, we can see results. And with cloud, it takes a lot longer. So when you do a cloud transformation, you're really looking at, depending on how many applications, I mean, you're looking at a couple years, if not longer. So I'll cover that, but but you have to be able to look at it through a lens where you're weighing your pros and your cons, because, there's a lot of good benefits, and I'll cover that with you guys here throughout the session. So let's get started. So I kind of am going to start. Oh, there we go. I'm going to start with, like, what is cloud transformation? A lot of people hear cloud transformation, and if you talk to State Farm versus Equifax versus, ADP and any other company, some of them might have a different definition, right? It's like, what does cloud transformation mean for them? So overall, though, if you look at it holistically, cloud transformation is the process of moving to the cloud. And it's like, everyone's like, well, what's the cloud, right? It's this thing in cyberspace that just exists. But that includes migrating applications, any of your software programs, desktops, obviously data, any type of, infrastructure. And then the overall goal is to align with the business objectives for your organization. It's very popular, and it has been for, I guess it's going on, I've got a timeline that I'll share briefly, but it's been going on for a while. It's just a matter of how many, I think, larger and or global companies have been able to take advantage of the benefits. It increases the efficiency of sharing and saving data. Data is huge. We have a lot of companies who have been around for 30 years, and they're trying to shift into being more of a data company, right? A data-driven company. And that's huge in our digital transformations, because it's not just about, oh, I have this application and or, this product that consumers are consuming. It's what are we doing with that data? It also accelerates time to market. enhances the organizational flexibility and scalability, which means you have the ability to scale. That's huge for transformation because a lot of companies want to, but they just can't scale. And then it also centralizes network security. So as part of my career, I jumped into network because it, one, intrigued me, whereas some people run away from it. Two, if you talk about cloud and anything that you're trying to do with infrastructure, you have to understand the foundation and network and security. And really in cloud, IAM, which is identity access management, those are the foundational components that everything revolves around. So if you don't understand it, then you're in meetings and you have an ability to probably do about maybe 60% of your job. But if you don't, as the business, also ensure the business understands, then it's a conversation and we don't have the right level of education for people to make the right decisions. So that's a big area when we talk about cloud transformation. And obviously it says at the top, right, it continues to be every organization's priority. And that has been true for a while in the market. So then when we talk about cloud transformation, it's like, okay, well, what's cloud transformation? Well, cloud transformation is what is cloud computing, right? Everything cloud, it's like, it's not cyberspace. It's not, oh, okay, I've got my iPhone and I'm backing up all of my data to the cloud. Well, that's what our generation of, our elderly generation have a phone, and it's like they don't have a clue. They just know that their pictures are being saved in the cloud, right? And so for us as technology professionals, we have to understand cloud computing. And what it is just the ability to take, data storage, cloud storage, computing power, basically the things that you would do and store in a data center yourself, and have the ability to move it into a cloud provider's data center without having direct active management of those resources. So where you really gain, and there's a couple slides, that in a couple slides we'll cover the benefits, but you really gain the ability to move away from feeling like you have an engineer on duty in a data center and you have system engineers who need to be able to, at the drop of a dime, go reboot a server and do all of these things that you have to do in the world of data centers, in order to keep your products, services, applications, whatever, to keep them what we consider up and consumable and available. If they're down, then you're costing the company money, and the company losing money, nobody is happy with. So, cloud computing is also known as hosted data centers available to many users over the internet. And that kind of confuses people sometimes, because when you start talking about over the internet, some people get really confused when you start talking about the internet. It started out eons ago, but it's evolved immensely. And what it means is we have the ability with cloud providers to put network, infrastructure in place that lets us connect into their managed network. And, cloud computing for any third-party customer, then they're able to access what you're hosting via the internet. So it's a little bit tricky, and we won't get into the specifics tonight, but definitely do, Google. There's all kind of information, on the web. And then I'm sure there's different, things that even with Matrix, right, whether it's certain, training partners and courses and certain stuff like that, where you can continue to kind of further educate yourself on cloud computing. But what I reference in the picture is, cloud provider hosted data centers are accessible over large cloud provider networks, which I mentioned. But what's great about that is it's across multiple global geographic locations from central servers. So what that means is if you have a data center and you're in a global company like we are in Equifax, if I had to run a data center out of India, as well as LATAM and the UK and in Canada and in the US and in Australia, my overhead is insane to try to keep all of my systems up, to try to feel like when I need to fail over, I can fail over to the closest region, but I have to host all of that in a data center that I own and operate. So what it allows you to do is say, hey, there's cloud providers in all of those regions. You can stand up your applications in multi-regions via cloud, and literally it's a 30-minute failover to just say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to US West instead of running out of US East right now. So there's just a huge benefit in being able to, basically be multi-region and also allow yourself as a company to be always on, because that's the goal. You got to be out. So a lot of people, start asking the questions about, HA, highly available. Highly available is not active active. So active active is, you're running out of 2 regions. Active passive is if you're running out of 1, but you can fail over and you can do it quickly. So all of that plays into, if you have downtime, you don't want to impact your customer for 2 days. You want to impact them for 30 minutes. And then down at the bottom, right, there's, it does reference private cloud, public cloud, and hybrid cloud. And there's also different flavors of cloud. So as you continue to further educate yourself on cloud, and whatever we continue to, provide as information and education through these sessions, definitely pay attention to what your company might be having conversations with as far as public or private cloud. So like for IBM had private cloud, but they would be public to somebody else, right? There's public cloud as Amazon and Google and Azure, Microsoft, some others. But private cloud is when a company chooses. So IBM was, they're public for other consumers, but they also were a private cloud for themselves. So they were hosting their own private cloud to host all of their, all of their IBM footprint without needing to go through another cloud provider. So it's interesting. And it's a whole nother world kind of, how a company chooses to actually get into cloud. But out of the box, absolutely, you have public cloud providers who have been around for a while and offer a lot of good, basically, managed services and tools for you to use.
Hey,
So I'll pause there, and you want to ask some questions? Go ahead, JB.
Ashley, why would a company pick a private cloud versus a public?
So it's it's really subjective. I would, one of the biggest things that we try to highlight when you talk about why should I go to cloud and who should I go to, you've got to, there's a couple of determining factors. So one, a lot of where your provider decision lies sometimes plays into your customers. So I'll share that, without sharing too much detail, we have some customers, they have explicitly called out, hey, I don't want to, I'm not going to do business with you if I have to have my information, sit in Amazon. And then we've had other customers who will legitimately say, hey, Google is great, but I don't think it's, mature enough. I'm not ready. I don't want to be in, in Google, or I don't want to be in Microsoft. And whether or not that company has had an experience that makes them, as a customer, kind of take that stance, it still is 100% a lot of times, sometimes customer driven, and or it's specific to what you're trying to do. So I'll admit, when you talk about Google, we are moving everything into Google Cloud Platform right now as a company, as Equifax, and Equifax is massive. We're also in AWS because we have some customers that they prefer AWS. Either they're in AWS, they feel like it makes the most sense. So we're going to continue to be multi-cloud. We actually have an Azure footprint as well. But Google has become our enterprise strategy and our primary footprint because it's a data platform. So again, we are taking Equifax as a 30-year-old company and turning it into a data company, a data-driven company. And Google offers a lot in the space of being a data platform. So we have, We have data fabric and big data and like, other companies, we've got that whole footprint and it's like everything revolves around it. Well, in order for us to do that, we had to pick the best platform that we felt like would meet our needs. So you have to look at your set of applications and or whatever you want to move that's running out of your data centers today, and you kind of got to categorize them. So you'll see on this picture, you've got, web, mobile, you have applications, you have database, storage, server. Like if you're going to want to do everything, then, you have to account for what it would look like to run out of one platform versus the other. But they're all, I've worked in all three, and, they're very similar. They definitely have some differences in the way that they have certain things where it's a little bit more complex to manage versus, another provider has figured out that, hey, this is what makes me competitive, and I'm going to make that particular area a lot easier. But then there's other things in their platform that might be a little bit harder. So think about it. They're being competitive with each other as well. And, everyone is just kind of honing into having specific, niche areas that their platform does really well. So I don't know if that helps, if that answers the question. I didn't really cover private too much. Private is just tricky, so I kind of want to stay away from it. Unless we have a use case where somebody wants to go private, I think we should focus on public. But I did want to call out, in case anyone asked the question, your company might be looking into private, and it has different, use cases that would apply. Any other questions so far? All right. So now I'm going to give a quick overview. I do think it's important. We were just talking about it. Cloud started back in the 90s, where, computers kind of just started dying down. It's like back in the day when IBM was huge and, the first computer and all of that, definitely very different, world in technology. But as we've matured and as we've, moved generation after generation, there's a timeline of all of the different cloud providers that launched their cloud offerings. And, Amazon, it was the first in 2006. So when you look at Amazon, they have several things that are very mature in, as far as their platform, because they've been doing it for so long. There's other providers that equally, have a lot that they offer. They just might not necessarily have as much. And if we're talking about it being 5 years from now, then, as each year passes, then each of the providers are continuously adding to their roadmap and continuously, just trying to ensure that they're staying competitive. So you'll notice in '08 is when, Google Cloud Platform came on the scene. Google App Engine is a really big one that a lot of companies leverage. 2010, Azure, right, released. So Microsoft released Azure. OpenStack also got in the mix. And then you'll see 2011, IBM Smart Cloud that's kind of deemed like more of in that private cloud sector. So IBM got into cloud as well, not only to move what they need to move, but in the business of being a provider. 2012, right, Oracle Cloud launched to really hone in on certain things that fall in that area. And then, I kind of stopped at 2013. So I haven't kept up with this. This is a little bit of an outdated deck, but it still applies. It just shows there are several providers. And again, you just need to take into consideration whatever your company is needing to do to move your applications out of a data center. And then, do research to understand which provider would be the best match for you. They are all very open and willing to start partnering with as many companies as possible. So they'll start, blowing up your phone if you reach out and show interest. We partner very heavily with AWS and Google, and they have helped us immensely in the last 3 years in our cloud transformation. So, professional cloud provider, professional services and all that. I mean, it's just a huge area. You can't sustain paying for it forever, but you definitely have, a window where they can come in and they can really help make sense of things based on what you're trying to accomplish. So let's talk a little bit about why is cloud so popular. We've referenced here and there, but more importantly, why is it so important to consider? Cloud automation is in addition to security, cloud automation is the key to world-class infrastructure as code and security. So I manage automation engineering teams, and of all the things that I love about what I do, as I shifted out of project and program and product management and moved into engineering, engineering is one of those things that I also, have been like, I do architecture and solutioning. When you have something that you're trying to accomplish, you have to be able to do it in the most, smart, let's work smarter, not harder way, right? In the most efficient way. And JV kind of mentioned it. I'm always looking for excellence. I'm always looking for ways to streamline and make things make sense. And cloud automation is huge, because if you are allowing your teams to move into cloud and be clicking in the console, and you're standing up a VPC, or you're adding a VPN to your virtual private cloud, and you're clicking in the console, guess what? As soon as you need to go make an enhancement and change something, you have to go start clicking around again, and then you're breaking stuff left and right. So doing things via manual is the absolute no-no in cloud. You will pay for it. It is not sustainable. It's a disaster. And that's just plenty of companies who have been there and done that along the way. It also allows you to have automation platforms and solutions that, obviously streamline your operations and reduce the unnecessary processes that require human intervention. So like I said, one of the things that we notice the most in technology is, if you're not careful, you have a bunch of engineers or leaders that will look at a problem and say, okay, I need to go implement X, and I'm going to do this as a net new initiative. Well, it's like, then they just stop, right? It's like, okay, this is net new. We got this out the door. And then, oh, now I'm on to the next net new thing. It can't always be the new and shiny thing. As an technology organization, and I have a huge operations background, you have to account for maintenance and support. So think about it from a data center perspective. When you buy a server and you stick it in a rack and you connect it to everything else it needs to talk to, every year you should be going through the exercise of what's my cost and what is my maintenance and support to ensure this does not get put on an end of service life, list, which means it's no longer supported. Because if that server crashes and you don't have maintenance and support, then you're basically shit out of luck and you are screwed. And you are then you are calling around places in Atlanta to find another server to take the old one that died out and put a new one in. So it's the same concept in cloud, right? That's very data center centric. But from an operations perspective, if you aren't wrapping automation around what you're deploying in cloud, then you're doing the same thing and you're hosing yourself, because you are requiring that a human being is going to need to come and step in and try to navigate through something they possibly didn't build themselves and figure out how to go either push an enhancement, push a new policy, do all of these things that they would have to do to just maintain your cloud environments. And then the other two huge, right? Cloud provider data centers also maintain the highest standard of cloud security. And that's for, applications, platforms, and infrastructure layers. So cloud security is huge. The biggest benefit of going through a cloud provider is they have their own security. Each company is going to wrap, our level of security on top of that, but getting security out of the box, and these providers get paid a lot of money and they put a lot of money in security, then you are, further protecting, your investment for what you're providing to your customers. And then the other big one, because as I mentioned, right, I've worked for data companies for the last probably 3 companies. Um, they're huge in enforcing that data encryption is in place for all data, and that offers fast, reliable, data protection without the cost or complexity. So PII and, which is personal information, social security numbers, any type of data that is 100% needing to be encrypted, then that's what avoids, I won't say the company names, but some of these retailers who've had breaches or banks that have had breaches, and then everybody's information is freaking all over the place. And you got somebody using, you know what I mean, the cards you had stored in their system. So it's a big deal, but cloud security and automation really are the primary reasons why you should 100% be looking at how you're, considering cloud to help improve what you're doing to secure the things that you provide for customers. Questions there?
When you look at the cloud and all of the security breaches that have been happening, say with China and Russia, were they on the cloud or were they on individual servers at those companies and their individual data centers, and they got in that way?
Sure. So I think it's possibly a mix. I have not. Now we keep up pretty. We try to be pretty diligent about understanding who's had breaches where. Obviously, I'm at Equifax because Equifax had a breach. So we all, there's multiple companies in addition to if a cloud provider has had a breach in some form or fashion. Not all of them, but I mean the Equifax one was huge, and we found the root cause of it. That was actually an Equifax developer who did not patch a system, and that's public knowledge, right? But if you have, this is also why it's really important to wrap hygiene, governance, and compliance into everything that you do, because from what I understand, I have not heard in the last few years that Amazon, Google, or Microsoft have had breaches. A lot of times it's the actual companies that are either, and when I talk about patching, it's, using the latest image that's going to secure whatever your application is, right? There's a lot of terminology that I don't want to throw at you. Y'all's head will start hurting, but you basically, it's no different than saying, hey, I have to go patch my server and make sure that, you know what I mean, it's going to be safe and secure over the weekend, because as soon as something gets out of date, then it opens up a risk that a hacker can get into it, right? And we have a lot of hackers that do nothing all day long but try to get into everybody's stuff. So, Target, Capital One, I wasn't going to name names, but I mean, there's definitely some big players that have been breached. And, it's public knowledge. They have to disclose it. And then they just come in to try to wrap, hey, we were doing it and we thought we were doing okay, but we're not. And so everybody in the space of security, even we just emulated a tabletop a couple weeks ago for ransomware and malware, right? Because the gas system just recently got hacked, and there were gas stations across the whole freaking country that didn't have gas. So it's like, really? And that was ransomware, and they wound up having to pay it. And it went days, right? So every company, no matter how much you're trying to feel like you're checking the box, it's like technology, right? Technology is ever changing. We're going, it's iPhones every year. It's, oh, now we're on the 10, now we're on the 11. Well, it's the same thing for a company. We have to constantly be, changing, evolving, and ensuring that we are taking as many, measures as possible. But I think from what I've gathered the last, several years, a lot of that were the actual companies versus the providers.
Many of the legacy companies that have, I'm not going to say outdated, but they have technology that works well for their business cases, but it's not mature enough for keeping up with current technology that's much faster. So it's easier to break some of their encryptions and different things like that. You definitely have to mature it. I made it home from vacation on last week, only to find a letter from a company that I interned with back early 2000, like 2002, 2003, that they had a data breach.
Oh
and
man.
my social security number and name was compromised in that data breach. And I interned for them for a few months, right, way back when.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting how pervasive, these attacks are,
Yeah.
and how easy it is to get at information. I'm sure a majority of our information is available out there right now to someone.
It is. We live in a scary world,
Yeah.
and then it's our responsibility as technology professionals too to ensure that we're doing everything possible because like I said, we can only it's like parents, right? A parent's going to parent the best that they can, but you have to always be further educating yourself on what else you can be doing better. And so, I like the comment that JV mentioned because it's one of the things that I pride myself on as long as you are in are you are advocating and encouraging and empowering people to be better, then they will, and then everybody is getting better. So it, I kind of call technology sometimes it's like just a never ending uphill climb, right? We're climbing up the mountain. We might get on top, but then you're going to have to do a couple more climbs, and that's just the way it is. It's like change. Technology is ever changing. Therefore, as companies, we're going to constantly be changing as well. And with cloud, it's a huge part of the equation.
Yeah, and
Um,
JB, that may be a topic that we want to get on the docket at some point. Is the security topic. There are many pathways we could take with that, so it may have to be a series as well.
right.
But for a few years we went heavy on security and then we scaled back. But as pervasive as some of these attacks are, it's something we definitely should bring back to the top of our radar.
I agree. So much relevance in that. Definitely good idea.
Absolutely. Because I mean, the leaders are talking about it, but one thing I say is you're only as good as the people who support you, to a degree, right? You can have all the answers in the world, but if you don't have the layers underneath you, also, you know what I mean, adopting and embedding those things, then we're not having the right conversations, right? And we're not doing the right things. So, absolutely. All right, let's move on. So let's talk about quickly the cloud computing benefits. And I talked about automation, right? Infrastructure as code for network and storage management. If no one's real familiar with network, it's okay. I am very passionate about it. I used to manage network and engineering teams. And it literally is just the wheels behind the clock, where everything runs and operates off of it. But automation for network is a really difficult thing to do. We've been trying to do it for 2 years and we're not quite there. There's some things that you can automate, and there's other things that you just have to really just get rid of it being legacy. But you also, provisioning, right? Provisioning is huge. If you're needing to, so me and my team provision environments for our AWS and cloud platforms. Well, and provisioning an environment it's just a shell of a VPC, which is a virtual private cloud, which and that's what it stands for. Basically, just says here's a shell of a VPC that's sitting in Google's managed network that we're going to use to host and store all of what we need to store for our application or service. But the provisioning side, you got to use Terraform, you got to use build tools. We are heavy on Jenkins, we're heavy with Terraform. Some of our other teams use Chef and Ansible and all that other stuff. So this is very developer centric. I don't want to get too heavy in it, but ultimately, everything that you do in cloud revolves around network security, the application infrastructure, and storage. So those boxes down in the bottom of that diagram are 100% what you would want to, really look at your footprint. And then up at the top, when it talks about a repository, so whether you use GitHub or whether you're in Bitbucket or any of these other, providers, a repository is basically just saying, hey, I have a repo that's full of code, and my different repos are where I'm going to go to deploy into my environments, right? You also can use CI/CD, which is a continuous integration, and continuous development approach. And that just lets you, basically store all of your code, any of your binary code, any of your source code. For a year and a half, I was compliance at IBM, and part of my many jobs was literally scanning code, and it was a pain in the butt. But what we learned is a lot of people have code sitting out in repositories, but if you're not doing the legwork, and I did this at IBM, if you're not doing the legwork to go look and review your code, Victor, this is kind of where internal audit comes in, right? Then you have a bunch of code that it's like, okay, well, who's the author of the code? Does it have a person's name when it shouldn't have a person's name? And, there's a lot of different things that you would have to kind of get into. So I guess from an automation perspective, I mentioned CI/CD, the, organizational level security policies is huge, because you can set security policies that say, hey, at the org level, these policies exist, and anything that anybody does underneath this in our cloud environments, it's inherited. So it makes you not have to set a policy at every single level. And that gets really tedious, and it requires a lot of overhead for your resources. And then obviously the big one, the security IAM controls, identity access management, is one of the largest areas in addition to network in cloud, because it says, what are you comfortable as a company allowing your engineers to do that doesn't increase risk to have exposure, and or anything sitting on the internet that you don't need sitting on the internet. So security IAM is a big one. And then obviously I talked about vulnerability scanning. So, looking for vulnerabilities, scanning your environment, scanning your code, that's all a part of the automation. It sounds like a lot, it looks like a lot, but once you implement it, it is a well-oiled machine. And it's very, very easy to manage. You just have to have the right individuals in a management space and in an engineering, skill set to do the job. And that's what it really boils down to. Technical benefits, right? So obviously we talked about a little bit from a data center perspective. These are all the things you have to do in a data center, no hardware refresh cycles. You're not dealing with hardware. Google's and Amazon are responsible for doing hardware refreshes for anything that we're running off in their data centers. There's no firmware, there's no, network and appliance patching. Patching is huge for servers. If you're not patching, then you're going to have a breach. Like, that's how you should look at it. And then limitless scalability, redundancy, and availability. And that's where I talked about earlier, multi-region, being able to scale, being able to say, hey, this particular application is available in 3 different countries, and I can do that in a very simplified way.
Hey, Ashley, can
Yeah.
I, when you see the engineers and the developers, the people involved with a lot of the automation work that's happening, I mean, that's such a growing space. I mean, that's a good space to be in, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, do you see, where do you see those people coming from? Are they developers? Are they in infrastructure type positions? Both?
Yeah, kind of a mix. That's a great question. Really good question, because I know a lot of companies are trying to figure out, like, how do I resource this, right? Because you're either going to get the challenge of the individuals who've been doing it a long time are so expensive that nobody can hire them, because you just, you've got a budget and you need 5 people. But if you hire this one, that equates to 2 people because they're so expensive. Obviously, hot commodity, costs more money. But to answer your question, it's really a mix. Over time, it's kind of evolved. So think about it as a company shifts the strategy and says, hey, we're getting out of data centers. At Weather and at Southwest, we had system engineers who we then turned into DevOps, right? It's like, okay, you no longer need to just be a system engineer. We're going to turn you into SREs and DevOps, right? Site reliability engineers. So it's a natural segue to push a system engineer or somebody else in a different role into a site reliability engineer role, because it kind of allows them to pick up shifting the mentality around site reliability, right? They're no longer site reliability for a data center, they're site reliability for their cloud environments. So it just shifts them into cloud. But then there's also individuals like we have guys on our network team. And I mean, this has just been, several teams that I've managed over the years where it's like, oh man, I've been doing Perl and Python and, whatever for network for years, but I want to learn Terraform and, you know what I mean? Like I want to learn automation. I want to do automation. So a lot of it is some of these, individuals who have mastered what they've done for a very long time in an infrastructure role, right? In a data center legacy role, but they want to transform their skill set as well. So you have a lot of people actually inside teams that are the perfect candidates. You just have to determine, do you have enough time to invest in the training and, you know what I mean, getting them to a level where they can, you know what I mean, where they can thrive. A lot of the training is hard. So what companies wind up having to do is outsource, then they bring in a team, you know what I mean, EPAM, a bunch of different, Mindtree. I'm thinking of all these people, all these, third-party vendors where sure, they can give you a team of 10 people and you can accomplish something. But a year later, when you're needing to roll them off at the end of December, because you can't continue to pay the cost of, you know what I mean, outsourcing, then guess what? You're rolling them off and nobody in your company has knowledge to pick that up. So it's this never ending, kind of plague of absolutely there's times where you have to outsource and you need third party, resources. But if you're not ensuring that your employees are getting that training and being educated as well, then you're shooting yourself in the foot and you're basically a year later starting all over, right? And then that's what causes companies to take longer than the business and leader and the executives want to get rid of paying $1 million a month for a third party vendor, contract versus investing in contractors or full-time employees yourself. So it's an interesting mix, but there's definitely a lot of people in the space of cloud that they're like raising their hands left and right. You just have to figure out how to shadow and get them connected, get the junior guys connected with the senior guys. And, if you need someone senior, figure out how to move your dollars around to where you can get someone senior and then just train up your junior guys. You don't have to hire 5 people if you get 2 really good ones that are able to invest that time back into the team. Really good question.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we were at the end there. So is there anything that we haven't covered that y'all's brains are churning, or, we didn't really do a slide yet on how to get started, but I'm happy to just kind of have a dialogue about it.
I'm interested. This is Bridget and how you got started, because you came from a PM role to a tech role. That's not easy to do.
I know.
And that's a huge learning curve. So how did you do that?
It is. So I've been a leader for, advocating for women, women in technology, which is an organization, as well as, women leadership in the companies I've worked at. What I think what I've been able to do, honestly, is just because I got into some of the really core fundamental areas, network allowed me to move beyond a network PM, if that makes sense. So it's like, what I pride myself on in my career is I'm one of these people that I hold myself accountable to become a subject matter expert for whatever it is that I'm responsible to manage. Whether, when I was in a PM role, those individuals didn't report directly to me, but I was responsible for the delivery and the operations of, those individuals doing what they need to do. And so, you're kind of at that dotted line space. I have a very strong personality. So, I'm one of these people, it probably shows. I'm very transparent. I speak up when we're in a meeting and it's like there's 30 people on the call and we're on the meeting and discussing the same topic for the second meeting and we're still not getting anywhere. I start talking and I'm like, all right, look, we are on the second round of trying to figure out what's needed. who's the decision maker and what do we need to do. So I'm very, sometimes I come across as a little bit impatient, but I strive for three things. I drive clarity, I drive efficiency, and I drive decisions, because in transfer, and that's why I think I've thrived in transformations. And this is now my third transformation at a company. You know, there, like, if you have the ability to, I'm not trying to stand out, I'm not an attention person. I like to hide from people. I'm legitimately somewhat of an introvert, but I'm very much a people person, because like I said, you have to be able to, you know, the one word is influence. So in my career, I learned very early on that even as a PM or a product owner or whoever, I had the power to influence. And I also had the power to influence leadership to, you know, move them into being able to make a decision. If your companies are not decisioning, then everybody is just talking about it. And it's a conversation, right? So I've had good CTOs and leaders that I've been under in transformation in the past as well, that were very big on taking risk. So when I manage data centers, if we had a mapping exercise and it was a month in and we still didn't know what this host server, you know, what all was running off of this host server, it's like, okay, well, we know these three applications are running off this host server, but we really don't know what else. Well, my CTO would look at me and be like, okay, just go disconnect the network cable. So we're not turning it off, because then you can't turn it back on if it's an old server sometimes, right? But I'm just going to go in the middle of the day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to go disconnect the cable. And there's a lot of leaders that don't feel comfortable doing that because it is disruptive, but I promise it's the fastest way as you guys map your data centers to go figure out what the hell is talking to what, right? Because if there's no documentation, you legitimately do not know. So I spent an entire year mapping servers in my data centers, and I had 9 of them. But you know what I mean? So risk takers, but also, you know, assessing risks the right way. But yeah, I mean, I've just been fortunate enough to have great leaders who saw my potential. I also I've always kind of had exceeds expectations on my performance reviews, and that also allows you to move, right? But moving into technology and moving into engineering, I think just because I worked with so many, you know, hardcore technical engineers as a PM, I picked up what they do, and I was able to talk the talk, and I was able to hear what they said and identify where there was a gap, bring it to, you know, someone's attention, and just really help maneuver and navigate the waters. So it let me move into leadership, and it's kind of been the sky's the limit ever since. So have a voice. If you want a seat at the table, find a way to get a seat at the table. And if you're passionate about, you know, technology, then learn as much as you can. And if you're a SME for, you know, what you do or what you touch, then also once you master that, go become a SME for, like, I literally know everything that the other team that I have to work with for security IAM, I know their whole world. And it's fantastic because I'm a dependency for them. They're a dependency for me. Well, we would be in constant turmoil if I didn't understand what they do. And you know what I mean? What it is that they have to develop and manage. So, you know, that's where you also play into building partnerships with the individuals that you have to work with.
This is Bridget. I have one more question. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I have one more question. Okay. I was able to study on my own and pass the AWS Solutions Architect Associates certification. I am trying to figure out how can I break into market now that I have that. I think it would have been better if I was working already on a team, but because of COVID and been laid off, I was able to get certification myself, but now I am stuck. How do I get in? Do I just go back to what I was doing before, which was asset management, a little project management, or do I just forget cloud altogether? I'm trying to figure out how to break in. If you're starting out, how to break in.
Sure. So, you know, I've got a couple of different responses there. One, because I came from a staffing agency, and, you know, JV can attest to this. like it's a lot about the Atlanta market. The Atlanta market is fantastic, but it's a lot about who you know, and also or who somebody else has a foot in the door for hiring managers. There's a lot of potential, but the market is saturated in Atlanta, and that should never be a deterrent though. I read people's posts on LinkedIn all the time where it's like, they've been just chipping away at their goal or their career aspiration for years. And definitely, but you also, it's like keeping the lights on, right? You still have to have a paycheck, and you got to be able to pay your bills and survive. So you might not always be able to move directly into an area, and you might need to be doing something as an interim. But definitely, I think a lot of it is about who you know. I have great contacts at Amazon. If you wanted to actually look at Amazon themselves, a lot of they're hiring like crazy. If you want to look at other other companies, there's also huge internships, paid internships. So we do them at Equifax all the time, and we just hired 8 people that came from a kind of single mothers program and into our security team. And like we're literally going to be able to kickstart an extraordinary career for them. So a lot of it, I think. And then there's also other programs in Atlanta that help. It's kind of for more of the youth, right? My husband used to work for Year Up. My companies I've worked with have partnered with them, but there's a lot of companies that partner and will be able to place you in addition to just staffing agencies. So I would say use the avenue that you have, which is between Victor, between John, between myself, and then there's a large network of people that what I mean can try to help you. But getting the foot in the door, a lot of times it just comes down to either like I relentlessly what not now, but I relentlessly apply for things online, on LinkedIn, and it kind of feels like it's a never ending, just you submit it and it disappears forever. But you never know. I got my job that I took when I did web and mobile, and I actually at every Shell gas station, the fuel rewards network, I rolled that out, and I went back to Texas for a year to do it. And it was so random, but I applied for that role. And the next day, I got a call because the HR guy worked at Matrix. He used to work at Matrix, and he saw that I had Matrix on my resume. So you never know who knows somebody. You just never know who is going to see what. And then that, what I mean? That's an additional foot in the door. So I don't know if that helps. I'm not trying to give you the,
Thank
it's
you.
like
That's
it's
great.
not always happy path, right? It's definitely hard.
So the 8 women, did they come from the WIT program? Women in
I think
Technology?
that might have been the WIT Singles Mother
Yeah.
program.
I
Yeah,
saw that. That's great. Thank you.
absolutely. And then I've done, a ton of stuff with them for years. So even if you're not embedded in any of those programs, reach out to me, and I'm happy to, pass you on to some contacts, because there's a lot of women help volunteer and just, continue to try to advance as many women across Atlanta as possible.
Bridget, there's a lot of people where Ashley is now at Equifax that had stints at IHG. So you probably know a fair amount of people that are at Equifax now. Now you know Ashleigh. There's a lot of opportunity at Equifax right now. So yeah, this is probably a good meeting. Good that you joined this meeting. I could see something happening from this for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then I know, what was the gentleman's name who was Webb, right?
Norman.
Norman, yes. I'm looking at him, but I'm
Norman.
like, what's his name? So, even Webb, I mean, Webb is, right. Webb is still huge. It's a big footprint, and it's like some people kind of were questioning, like, is it dying? And no, it's not dying. There's still a huge footprint there, web and mobile and applications and all of that. So if you're in a similar position, I will say Equifax is a massive global company. We have 8,000 people in technology. It's crazy. But that's also global.
Okay.
But
Um,
do what?
I was about to say, what would be a good fit for me? I mean, I haven't done web and goodness in a long time. So if I'm getting into it, I'm starting from the bottom up. So what would be a good start for me?
So my question is that what you want to do though? Is that why you brought it up? Because you're wanting to get back into it? Or what have you been doing currently? Or is it just, you just want to get back into technology? And not to put you on the spot. But
Yes, because that's okay. Like I said, I went to school for it very early. I mean, early 2000s, wasn't able to get into it.
got it.
And I worked in a grocery store for a couple of years, and now, things got bad. I'm currently in between jobs, so I'm like, well, maybe I ought to give it a try again.
I got you. Yeah, it's very similar, and I would treat that as kind of like help desk, right? There's a lot of people who get like out of college, get a degree, and it's like they can go into a help desk role, and you don't want to stay in that role forever, but some people love it and they want to, right? So it's like it's all about a mentality. If you're starting at more of a, kind of I wouldn't say junior, but what is it like it starts with an I.
And more
Yeah.
internship.
Yeah, or like an intermediate. That's what I think I was getting at. If you're starting in more of
No.
an intermediate position, technology still pays really well. As a PM, I was making 80 out the door. And that's crazy money. And I wasn't even doing anything except like managing, you know what I mean, a bunch of teams to go and do what they need to do. So if it's something that you're passionate about, is something you want to get into, then you just have to, you got to apply. But that's where I also think a lot of the networking comes in, right? Networking with people, networking with, with staffing agencies, working with recruiters, because there's people who are looking for individuals who aren't as experienced, right? That 1 to 3 years experience is a role that people are looking for. You obviously wouldn't get looked at for somebody who's looking for experience 3 to 5 years or greater than 5. But that 1 to 3, and JV can attest to that, that's still in staffing. That's a huge area because they don't have the money to bring in the 7-year, candidate. And they need to bring people in that they can invest time in.
Well, this is probably a good space to talk about the automation work. So to tool yourself that you're able to do automation work, like learning, for example, if you don't know Python, I would say that's probably a good thing to learn. And you could probably do that on your own.
Absolutely. And like,
I heard of Python, but I never used it.
You never used it? Yeah. But that's okay.
Yeah. I think as a precursor to things that are in the DevOps space or in the cloud space, I think one of the things that you typically have to be conversant on is going to be Unix as well, right? So you want to know some basic languages.
Yeah.
But Unix and Linux is absolutely the coin of the realm.
Totally agree.
In that space.
Totally agree. Linux is one of those things that is universal for every company.
Right.
And you're either going to be in Linux or and I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of what the other thing is. You're either in Linux or you're, or you're in something else, and whichever direction or path the company is in, then that's a universal language for sure. As well as like for web, right? Java, JavaScript, all of that, anything that you're doing for any of that application development. All of that are very universal languages.
So there are some core. There are some. Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm.
No, you all go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I'm about to ask Leah about GitHub. I was about to get on that a while back, but I didn't really understand how it worked and how do you do projects and how do you get paid from it?
Well, GitHub is just so it's kind of like if you're familiar with Jenkins. So there's build tools, And then
Mm.
there's tools that, you know, basically allow you to, it's no different than saying you're going to go in your email, and then and on the side you could create a bunch of folders, right? You could create a bunch of folders for any of the emails you want to try to, you know, categorize for certain things, right? People sometimes do it for their bills, people do it personal, whatever. All GitHub and Bitbucket do is allow you to have a similar, you know, kind of repository folder structure that says you can go and you can check in your code. So whatever you go automate and whatever you write code for, whether you do, you know, so like in Google, we do you know, like there's certain things that we might need to write with Python. There's certain things we might want to write with Terraform. Then we can go check in our code and it stores it. So that's why it's called a repository. It's there to basically, you know, store a repository of your code. How you get paid, but you're not going to necessarily get paid because you're using Bitbucket. That's just one of the functions that your job would entail. You would get paid by being a developer who's, you know, pushing something for an application. Does that make sense? So that's where cloud comes into play. You would use GitHub to store your code, and then you would use CI/CD or some other form, whatever the company's using, to, like, Jenkins is a build tool, right? You can go into Jenkins and it's literally like it has drop downs where you can have certain fields and it's like, hey, I need to go pick this region and I need to, you know, I need to do this subnet, I need to do whatever. And then you go and you push it and it's going to build via backend automation into your cloud environment. So I know that's a lot. It's a lot to talk about it, but all of what this screen is showing are all the different tools that are there to help you. So it's like going to Home Depot and saying, oh, I'm going to go and build a shed. Okay, that's great. But if you don't have a miter saw and you're choosing to cut your wood with a regular saw, you can get the job done. It's going to take you a very long time and it's going to be very painful. If you have the right tools that are there to help make things very easy, then you can do things in a very streamlined way, right?
So one thing I was going to add for you, Norman, is based on what I hear you saying, there may be opportunity from a mentoring standpoint, just to connect you with some folks. I know you mentioned early 2000s, you were into some web development, but I think there are probably going to be some gaps that we need to fill in just from an exposure standpoint with how technology has shifted from that time to now, as well as some of the tools and capabilities, resources, et cetera, that you can take advantage of to just make yourself more competitive, even when you're looking at more of that intermediate role. Because again, you know, you can be introduced to different groups and be able to network with different people, but at the end of the day, we want you to be comfortable as you begin to go into these different opportunities, maybe interviews, et cetera. So we want you to feel like you have a baseline understanding of concepts, of terminology, different things like that, that will assist you. Because even when we think about Git, right? So Git's just a repository. It's a souped up repository, right? It can do some things on the infrastructure of the technology, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be the ultimate contributor to the actual code that's being executed. Git isn't doing any of that for you. You're doing that, right? So it's just really partnering you with some folks that can spend some time to walk you through what does web development look like today? What are some of the tools that people take advantage of to do that? And more so beyond that, how are people taking advantage of the cloud to get it done now? Right? Because early 2000s, you're probably doing a lot of things, you know, just on your own computer, on your own server, as you're educating yourself through it. You know, it's a slightly different.
Dreamweaver.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was a big Dreamweaver fan too. So yeah, so the things have shifted a little bit. So that's that even more so aligns to web design, right? And so sometimes when we say web development versus website design or web page UI, UX type things, like there's a difference, right? So we just have to chat through and work through what some of those things are. And definitely, Shanika put JV and Ashlea's information for LinkedIn in there. Reach out to us. Definitely reach out to us. And if it's not us that's doing it, we have networks of people that I'm sure would be willing to invest an hour or so. My only ask is that if we go down those pathways, just make it meaningful for yourself. Like make it something that's valuable.
Okay.
And I would just add to what everybody said that technology is constantly changing, as Ashlea indicated. And so what we used to think of as a valuable skill set may not, that particular product, that particular software might be not that much in use anymore. So we need to develop techniques to get our finger on the pulse of what's happening currently and what is potentially going to be happening in the future, right? And if you're trying to get back into the business, if you're trying to get into this, one of the things that I would suggest is, a good start is meetings like this, but there are going to be also other groups specifically for individual technologies that if you determine that that's hot, if that's current, or if it's potentially a future thing, then I would get involved in that. And I would place a lot less emphasis on what I used to know, right? And a lot more emphasis on what I currently need to understand and what is coming down the pike, that I may need to understand. And what's coming down the pike is things like machine learning and AI, and, certainly DevOps is huge now. Everybody's moving to the cloud, so that's hot, right? So everything that surrounds that is a direction and what you should be attuning yourself to, listening to in the environment.
Absolutely.
But yeah, good luck.
Absolutely. And then there's also development
Thank you.
communities. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of ways to look at that. But and then don't take like, hey, I've got to go learn something new. I mean, I called it out. I am constantly learning and taking new things on. So he just mentioned AI and machine learning. That is huge. And I don't know anything about it. I have a little bit of an inclination of what some of that is, but I don't know enough to really be talking about it. And that's okay, right? We need to constantly be trying to figure out what else to add, you know what I mean? Add to our bucket of skills and knowledge. So
Absolutely.
stay
Now,
encouraged. And yeah,
Mhm.
there is a lot of opportunity
Right.
to get connected. Go ahead.
Oh, and the other advantage of doing that is if you can get ahead of the current group by getting into new stuff, as Ashley is saying, and she's a very accomplished IT person, but there's a whole lot of subjects that she still doesn't have is not strong in. And I'm just saying that you could leapfrog even a resource like Ashlea by identifying something that has a future, that has legs, as they would say in show business, and getting into that. Another thing I would add is this thing called natural language processing, which is a very deep. Some of this is a little bit deep and a little bit requires a lot more stuff. But these are the things that are going to be disruptive technologies that if you begin to have a grasp of that and begin to talk about that a bit, you may be able to get your foot into the door and be an early adopter, an early employee, or professional in those arenas. And that's the trick, right? It's not so much, that you used to do this and now you don't remember it anymore, whatever. Just learn it. Just take what you know and just think to yourself, am I logical? Right? Am I logical? Am I diligent? And can I take these soft skills and add that to an approach where I can acquire new hard skills and begin to use that as a way to get your foot in the door and to get your career started in tech.
So that's all very, very valuable information. I think one of the challenges, especially when you look at groups such as us, and when I say groups such as us, minority groups, is that we tend to discount things that would make us successful, right? So yes, there was a time where people were developing very intricate, complicated coding platforms to do data analytics. But then you have companies like IBM that will come out with the Cognos and Temperature, and then you have Tableau, you have ClickSense, ClickView. You have all of these tools
Power BI, and so right.
that take the complicated and make it very simple. And now you have people that can say they are data analysts, but really they're leveraging a tool. And the same with the natural language processing or text analytics that was just referenced. You do have what we call citizen data scientists that now take advantage of tools to do things that your traditional data scientists would typically code, whether it's Python or SAS or whatever tooling that they're leveraging to code it and do their algorithms and do their learning. You have tools out that can do that now. So sometimes it's about getting exposure to those things as well. Yes, you still have to understand terminology, but it does remove you from having to be as skilled in the coding aspect of it, as long as you're staying on more of the drag and drop side. But there's a place for everyone in technology. There's just a place. You just have to find yours.
So with that being said, Ashley or anyone in the group, I know, of course, like you said, there's resources on YouTube and other places, but I mean, are there any like blogs or podcasts or any books that you would suggest when it comes to cloud transformation?
I'm thinking. I'm not the reader. So this is where I'm like a unicorn. Everything that I have done and that I know, I just like soak up information from people talking around me, or if I don't know, I go bug people and I start talking to them. So I'm not a reader. I'm sure that there's probably some really good books on Amazon. I think what I'll do is what I'd prefer to do is really reach out. So I'm contacts with someone who is phenomenal. She is a minority and works as a solution architect for Amazon, and her name is Keisha, and she's amazing. I feel like between her and maybe a couple others that I know, they'd be able to answer that question probably better than I could. But let me take that as an action to go have a couple of follow-up conversations, because there is a lot of information. And then, so, each of these providers also have courses.
Exactly.
So Google, like, right, we educate our Equifax employees by, having them take Google Coursera courses, and then we obviously, purchase some licenses. But you should look at if your company has any HR or training department where they're also wanting to further educate employees. There might be things that you could take advantage of. If you're not with an employer, then yeah, it's just a matter of let me find out what's out there for public consumption that doesn't necessarily cost, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of the situation. Like I said, I work for a small startup, so
Right.
unfortunately that's not available at the moment. And of course, I know about the Coursera's, but I just didn't know if maybe there was something, because what tends to happen for me is that I end up down a rabbit hole and I don't know which one I want to go with. So I was just curious if you had any suggestions.
Yeah, I'll definitely get a couple of people to give me some insight.
Okay.
For sure. And that's the first step, right? Because anything you can do to further, increase your knowledge power, then that gives you power to, make moves in your career and or in your role that you're doing to just, continue to excel in your current role.
And it's not just so blogs is a good idea, absolutely. But when you go to Google or Amazon and places like that, they'll actually allow you to download trial versions of their software.
Exactly.
Right. So you'll be able to actually put the software on your desktop at home or on whatever computing devices you have at home and begin to practice. And yes, you want to speak to people, of course, and learn from them, but you'll also be able to do some learning with this great technology, in your hands as well. And that's the other side of this, right? You can speak to people, but you can also get it and play with it and try and, think about some projects that you might want to do, some automation, whatever, and you can begin to build out your skill set that way as well.
Exactly. My husband works for, thanks, Greg. That was great info.
Sure.
My husband works for Atlanta Public Schools, And, we laugh about it because I'm like, these kids are learning how to code, but we have an entire generation of adults who are trying to figure out how, you know what I mean, what's available to them. And so I also have, I think some things that I can probably chat with him about as well, because there are a lot of things that are available beyond, you know what I mean? It's like kind of public consumption, right? So I'll ask too, because there's a lot of the just languages, programming, and I'm sure that segues very easily into stuff for cloud.
Actually, a question around these different companies that offer the private networks. When you go into your company and you have AWS, is there a organization within the company making sure that when you're building the networks and building the VPNs, that they're reviewing that before anybody just goes out and says, oh, let me just create this new network and open up this gateway and do different things?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is where, I think where I mentioned governance and compliance, and then hygiene really comes into the picture. Because one of the plagues that we have, and this is not a ding, so I'm technology, I'm not security, but I am in every security, governance meeting. I'm a governance board member. I've been in compliance for years. We have to partner, right? I thought about moving to security at some point in my career so that I can, know that I can kind of leverage both sides. But yeah, if you think about it, when it comes to cloud, so the best way I can describe it is you have at a platform level, if it's AWS, right, you have an org level. And underneath that org is any of your folder structure, which is whether it's an account, an AWS account, then underneath each AWS account is an AWS VPC. And then in those VPCs is where you're able to do the word configuration, right? You can configure networks, you can configure, whatever it is that you're saying you need to do for your application. Well, the reality is if you don't have enough people in security that understand and are able to set policies at the org level or at the account level, then guess what? You got engineers in the VPC level. And again, this is where security IAM comes into play. If they have permissions and they're overprivileged, then they're able to go do stuff and spin up networks that they should never be able to touch. Only the infrastructure network team and only the, security engineering team should have access to do certain things in cloud environments. And because what it means is, yes, we all want to feel like we can do everything, but we can't. And that's where boundaries and parameters and roles and permissions comes into play. So the other thing I would call out to answer your question is, you have some companies, and I've been in one, and it's really frustrating if you're in this space, where security just wants to set policy, right? They just want to, like, we're here to set we define the policy is documented, this is what it is. But there's also individuals in security like the IAM team and others, if it's organizationally, like the org structure is set to where they actually have to do the work to set those policies, then they have to do their part. And what happens is security will punt the ball over to technology. Oh, I set the policy and like I'm done, right? Yeah, you can set the policy and you can have policy documents, but we also have to work together to ensure that we configure it to, to match and abide to those policies. So that's where the word controls comes into play. If you don't have the right organizational structure for your cloud, for your cloud transformation, then you're going to have policies being set, but you have to have the individuals that can actually, enable those policies and the config, as far as configuring or configuring it properly. And then you can say, okay, developers and engineers, this is your permission box for you to operate out of, and you can do a lot, but you can't do everything. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And for Bridget, I know I just got a role as a Scrum Master for a site reliability engineering team. So I'm trying to learn more about how we do our AWS and things of that nature.
Yeah, my boss actually is leading the kind of SRE chapter across Equifax. And it's definitely like, it's that DevOps, it's, break fix, it's all of that fun. But you'll also learn a lot, and you'll pick stuff up. But it really comes down to you. So this is where as Scrum Masters and a PM, anybody in a functional role, do yourself a favor and go and educate yourself on what those policies should be, right? So go find out who's running governance, go find out who's running compliance, what kind of tools is your company using to scan those cloud environments, right? Because you should have a report that says, here's the ones that are meeting the controls and here's the ones that are failing and not hitting any of those controls at all. Because those are the environments and those are the teams that are going to be at risk for saying, oops, we didn't do something and now we have a breach and we're on Twitter, all over Twitter tomorrow, right? It's like, that the threat and vulnerability management, which is scanning and, compliance, is huge to tell you who's missing the mark versus who's meeting the mark. So do a little bit of your legwork to know what they should be doing. Otherwise you're scrum mastering and you're hearing them talk all day. Because I used to be a scrum master, and it's like, okay, I get it. And I can track deliverables all day long. And this is what we're going to do in our sprint. But how does that correlate back to what they should be doing? You see what I'm saying? Like to what the business is, holding them accountable to adhere to.
All right. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It appears that time has just gotten away from us. Like it's such a good conversation. And I looked up and I'm like, oh, it's 8:12 already.
It is. I'm sure y'all are hungry. You ever have kids that you've kicked out of the room and told you to leave you alone. So,
really appreciate the conversation here. This has been really helpful, really enlightening. I hope that those that are participating have taken at least one thing minimum from the conversation. I know I've taken a bunch of nuggets that I can leverage even in my job today. So Ashley, we really thank you for sharing your expertise. I know you have many connections in this space, and it's possible that we will see you again down the road for some of our conversations in regards to the different platforms. But again, really appreciate you taking an opportunity to be with us tonight and share your expertise. Very much appreciated.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And Victor, I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on what you're saying, but I wanted to add two more things. I've been in IT since the 70s, and I would say two things. If you're looking for a job, ignore that there's going to be a long list of criteria that they're asking for. They're never going to that. They're looking for the ideal candidate. They're never going to get. People don't have all those skills, right? So don't get disheartened if you don't have all of that criteria. That's one thing. And the other thing is it's always, even as a technician, it's always about selling yourself, right? Having that positive attitude, being hopeful, and believing that you can do this is really probably the most important aspect here. So I would just say, always keep that in mind.
You're missing your calling. You need to be in staffing. You're saying all the things that all of our account managers or recruiters at Matrix would be saying to everybody else, because it's 100%, right? So absolutely. But that's what's good. So for Norman and other people, being connected with staffing agencies is huge, because you have those conversations and that dialogue, and then that interview coaching and, how to position your resume and all those things. I just can't say how much it impacted, others as well as myself, and just take advantage of it for sure.
Absolutely.
With that, do we have any final questions that we're burning? If not, I will go ahead and close this out.
Can I just say one thing, Victor? I really quickly, for Norman to have hope that you already know how to code. If you can code, you can code in a lot of different languages.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be, just like Greg was saying before and Ashley was saying, you're going to be fine. you know, the key things are what both of them were saying, to pick the right things. So pick the things in automation, pick the things, you know, looking into the future. Don't look backwards, look forward. I also think, you know, what we've talked about is to try to retool yourself and retrain yourself. Reading things, you know, training, that's great stuff. But you want to have a mentor. As important as the training, the technical training that you have and book smarts, you need to have a mentor that's going to help guide you through just more practical aspects of what's going to happen in your search and what's going to happen in the progression of your career. So that, like, person to person type of mentorship is just so important. So yeah,
that's what I didn't have is a mentor.
Exactly. Mentorships are fabulous.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure, everyone.
Yeah.
Really, really happy to have provided, you know, some additional insight, and definitely, you know, JV and Victor will continue down the clouds, you know, the cloud series, and more to come. Right.
Awesome.
Thank you. This is
Thank
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks,
Great.
everyone. Thanks for joining
Great
us.
session, everyone. Have a nice evening. Bye.
All right.
Yes.
All
Right now.
right, you all take care.